America is on the brink of collapse, and most people don't even see it coming. That's what I've been trying to tell everyone who will listen. I'm not saying this for publicity or to create panic. I'm genuinely concerned about our future. I've spent years building companies that push the boundaries of what's possible, and that gives me a unique perspective on the systems that keep our society running. What I'm seeing right now should concern every American. If you value your family's safety and your financial future, you need to understand what's coming. Before I continue, make sure you're subscribed to this channel and hit the notification bell. Also, leave a comment with the word warning so I know who's actually paying attention to this critical information. Now let's talk about what's really happening. When I speak at public events, I have to be careful. Markets move when I talk. But behind closed doors, I've been warning about a perfect storm that's brewing. One that could fundamentally alter American society within months, not years. During a recent private tech conference, I laid it out clearly. We're watching the beginning of a perfect storm that could fundamentally alter American society within months, not years. I wasn't speaking as a CEO or public figure. I was speaking as a father, worried about what world my children will inherit. The gravity of the situation keeps me up at night, and it made everyone in that room sit up and take notice. I've never seen a room full of tech executives go so quiet, so quickly. This wasn't about getting headlines or moving stock prices. This was about facing reality, something too few people in positions of power seem willing to do right now. The first major vulnerability I see is America's crumbling infrastructure. Look around you. Our power grid is operating on technology from the 1960s and 1970s. One major solar event or coordinated attack could leave entire regions without power for months. What happened in Texas was just a small preview of what could happen nationwide. I've studied this extensively, and the statistics are truly frightening. Our power grid faces over 350 significant cyber attacks each year, according to Energy Department reports that rarely make headlines. What's even more concerning is that successful penetration of these systems has increased by 27% in just the last 18 months. A prolonged power outage would quickly cascade into other essential services. Without electricity, water treatment facilities stop functioning. Fuel pumps can't operate. Communications break down. Food spoils. And this isn't some distant theoretical scenario. It's a vulnerability we're living with right now. But the infrastructure crisis is just the tip of the iceberg. Our financial system is showing dangerous signs of instability that few want to acknowledge publicly. We're sitting on the largest debt bubble in human history. The numbers don't add up, and at some point, math always wins. The Federal Reserve has been printing money at unprecedented rates, devaluing the dollar while creating artificial market conditions that cannot be sustained. The data is undeniable. The national debt has now surpassed $35 trillion. That's over $100,000 for every man, woman, and child in America. Most Americans don't realize that nearly 40% of all US dollars in existence were created in just the last 3 years. This kind of currency creation has historically led to severe economic consequences in other nations. I'm not alone in this assessment. Several prominent hedge fund managers have quietly been positioning their portfolios for what they're calling a historic market correction that could wipe out retirement savings for millions of Americans. I'm not talking about problems that might emerge decades from now. I'm warning about a convergence of crises that could unfold within months. When systems become this fragile, it doesn't take much to trigger a chain reaction. All it would take is one unexpected shock, a natural disaster, a cyber attack, or a geopolitical conflict, and we could see a rapid unraveling of systems most Americans take for granted. The vulnerability lies in how interconnected our modern systems have become. A disruption in one area quickly spreads to others. For example, a serious solar flare, something NASA says is increasingly likely as we enter a new solar cycle, could knock out satellites that our financial systems, transportation networks, and communications all depend on. We've had near misses with such events in recent years, barely avoiding catastrophe by mere days or hours. Yet there's been little meaningful action to harden these systems against such threats. What many Americans don't realize is just how dependent we've become on a global supply network that operates on razor-thin margins. The average American city has about 3 days of food supplies. After that, shelves empty quickly. This isn't fear-mongering, it's simple logistics. Our just-in-time delivery systems are incredibly efficient during normal operations, but catastrophically fragile during disruptions. We saw small examples of this during the pandemic, but those shortages could pale in comparison to what's potentially coming. The situation has actually worsened since the pandemic in ways most people don't see. Key manufacturing components now have even longer lead times. Critical pharmaceuticals are increasingly concentrated in fewer production facilities. Agricultural inputs, like fertilizer, face significant production challenges. All of this creates a system where seemingly small disruptions can have massive downstream effects, potentially leaving store shelves empty for extended periods. What concerns me deeply, and what should concern all of us, is America's growing social fragility. A society is only 3 meals away from chaos. What happens when supply chains fail? Inflation spikes further, and people can't afford essentials. It's a sobering question that demands serious consideration. America's social fabric is already showing signs of significant strain. Political polarization has reached levels not seen since the Civil War era, according to multiple studies. Trust in institutions continues to decline precipitously. Economic inequality has created two Americas living side by side, but experiencing radically different realities. These divisions create a situation where responding cohesively to a major crisis becomes increasingly difficult. When people don't trust their leaders, their neighbors, or their institutions, collective action breaks down exactly when it's most needed. We've already seen this playing out on a smaller scale during recent natural disasters. As someone who builds cutting-edge technology, I'm deeply concerned about our technological vulnerability. We've built a civilization dependent on systems that few understand, and even fewer can maintain. Our technological sophistication has outpaced our technological resilience. This observation highlights a dangerous paradox. As our technology becomes more advanced, it also becomes more opaque to most users. Think about it. How many people truly understand how the internet works? How power generation and distribution function? Or how our financial systems operate at a technical level? This knowledge gap creates significant vulnerability. When systems fail, the pool of people who can actually repair them is surprisingly small. I've spoken with infrastructure security experts who confirm this concern. They describe scenarios where relatively small disruptions could take weeks or months to resolve simply because the specialized knowledge needed for repairs is concentrated in too few hands. The energy transition challenges we're facing reveal another potential breaking point. We're attempting to completely transform our energy infrastructure while simultaneously increasing our dependence on it. The math and physics of this transition are being obscured by politics. While I strongly support sustainable energy, my companies are built around it. I'm concerned about how the transition is being managed. The current electrical grid cannot support a rapid shift to electric vehicles without massive upgrades. Renewable energy sources, while growing impressively, still face intermittency challenges that require enormous storage solutions not yet built. Critical minerals needed for batteries and other green technologies face serious supply constraints. The data confirms these concerns. Projected demand for lithium, cobalt, nickel, and rare earth elements far exceeds current production capacity. And many of these resources are concentrated in geopolitically complex regions, creating additional vulnerability. Even in my own field of artificial intelligence, I see risks that keep me awake at night. We're racing toward artificial general intelligence without adequate safety protocols or governance structures. This may be the biggest wild card in humanity's future. AI development has accelerated far faster than many experts predicted even 2 years ago. Systems are now being developed with capabilities that weren't expected until the 2030s. While this offers tremendous potential benefits, it also creates new vulnerabilities. These systems are increasingly being integrated into critical infrastructure, financial markets, and security applications, with inadequate testing and safeguards. Many AI researchers share my concerns privately, while being more cautious about expressing them publicly. The competitive race between companies and nations is creating a situation where safety considerations are often secondary to being first to market with new capabilities. We're also entering the most dangerous period of international relations since the Cold War. Multiple major powers are positioning for advantage, while America's traditional leadership role is being actively challenged. The post-World War II international order that provided relative stability for decades is visibly fraying. Rising powers are asserting themselves more aggressively. Resource competition is intensifying. Military buildups are accelerating in multiple regions simultaneously. What makes this particularly concerning is how it intersects with our domestic vulnerabilities. America's internal divisions make it more difficult to respond coherently to international challenges. Our financial fragility limits options for addressing threats. Our infrastructure vulnerabilities create tempting targets. All of these factors combine to create a geopolitical environment where miscalculation becomes more likely and more dangerous. Our agricultural system has been optimized for efficiency, not resilience. A single black swan event could expose how fragile it's become. Most Americans don't realize how concentrated our food production has become. Just for companies control over 80% of beef processing. Similar consolidation exists across most agricultural sectors. Our crops have become increasingly uniform, creating vulnerability to diseases or pests. Modern farming relies heavily on complex supply chains for seeds, fertilizers, pesticides, and equipment parts, many of which come from overseas. Weather pattern changes are creating new challenges for growing regions. Agricultural security reports confirm these concerns. Our food system has been optimized to provide maximum output at minimum cost during normal conditions. But this efficiency comes at the expense of redundancy and resilience, exactly what's needed during crisis scenarios. The financial vulnerabilities go beyond just national debt. The derivatives market has created layers of complexity and interconnection that make the 2008 crisis look simple by comparison. Few understand how these systems actually work anymore. This complexity creates the potential for cascading failures that could move through the financial system faster than regulators could respond. The numbers are truly staggering. The global derivatives market now exceeds $600 trillion in notional value, many times larger than the entire world economy. These financial instruments are incredibly complex, often understood only by the specialists who create them. This complexity obscures risk and creates situations where seemingly isolated problems can quickly become systemic. Financial risk analysts acknowledge these concerns, but typically only in private conversations. Politically, there's little incentive to highlight these vulnerabilities, even as they grow larger and more complex. Through my companies, I operate at the intersection of energy, transportation, space, finance, and artificial intelligence, giving me a vantage point few others possess. I'm seeing warning lights flashing across systems that most people don't even know are connected. The historical patterns are unmistakable if you know where to look. This multidisciplinary perspective allows me to identify correlations and vulnerabilities that more specialized experts might miss. Modern society operates as a complex system of systems, with countless interdependencies that create non-obvious points of failure. I'm not saying this to scare you or to make headlines. I'm saying it because I genuinely believe these warnings need to be taken seriously. The convergence of vulnerabilities I'm seeing doesn't have many historical precedents, but the few that exist don't end well for unprepared populations. So what can we do? We need to build resilience at every level: personal, community, and national. The coming years will reward preparation and punish complacency. This focus on resilience, rather than just prevention, reflects a mature understanding of complex systems. Some disruptions simply can't be prevented. What matters is how quickly systems can adapt and recover. At a personal level, maintain emergency supplies, develop practical skills, and create financial buffers. At a community level, build local production capacity, energy independence, and stronger social connections. And at a national level, we need infrastructure hardening, strategic manufacturing capacity, and more distributed, redundant systems for essential services. These aren't radical suggestions, they're common-sense responses to the vulnerabilities I've outlined. There's a difference between paranoia and prudence. History rewards the prudent. This distinction is important. Preparing for potential disruptions isn't about fear or panic. It's about sensible risk management. Throughout human history, societies and individuals who built in margins of safety have consistently fared better during unexpected challenges. This isn't about building bunkers or withdrawing from society. It's about creating reasonable buffers against disruption. Having a few weeks of emergency supplies isn't paranoid. It's prudent. Developing some practical skills isn't extreme. It's sensible. Diversifying investments across different asset classes isn't fearful. It's wise. I've studied historical periods of significant change, and this pattern is consistent. Those who recognize shifting conditions and adapt accordingly fare far better than those who assume stability will continue indefinitely. One aspect I think deserves special attention is community resilience. The modern world has weakened community bonds, but challenges ahead will make them essential again. Strong local connections may become your most valuable asset. This might seem surprising, coming from a tech CEO, but it reflects historical reality. During major disruptions, local communities become the primary support system for most people. National resources get stretched thin. Supply chains break down. But neighbors helping neighbors has repeatedly proven to be humanity's most reliable response to crisis. Areas with stronger social cohesion and local organization recover faster and suffer less during major disruptions. This suggests that building relationships and strengthening local systems might be just as important as any material preparations. The timeline for potential disruptions is what gives my warning its urgency. We're not talking about theoretical risks decades away. We're seeing precursor events right now, and the full convergence could happen within months or a few short years. Various vulnerability indicators are indeed flashing red across multiple systems simultaneously. Historical precedent suggests that when multiple systems become stressed concurrently, the timeline to significant disruption can accelerate unexpectedly. What begins as a manageable challenge in one area can quickly trigger cascading failures across interconnected systems. The electrical grid affects water treatment, which affects food distribution, which affects social stability, which affects financial systems, and suddenly, what seemed like isolated problems combine to create a perfect storm scenario that overwhelms response capabilities. There's an enormous gap between what's discussed publicly and what's being prepared for behind closed doors. Pay attention to actions, not words. This observation highlights an uncomfortable truth. There are often significant incentives for leaders in both government and business to project confidence even when significant concerns exist internally. No elected official wants to be accused of creating panic. No CEO wants to spook investors. The result is a situation where public statements often diverge dramatically from private preparations. I've noticed this pattern accelerating in recent years. Major financial institutions are quietly stress-testing more extreme scenarios. Government agencies are updating continuity plans. Large corporations are reassessing supply chains and critical dependencies. These actions tell a very different story than the public narrative of stability and normalcy. Let me be clear about America's electrical grid vulnerabilities. The grid is the linchpin for everything else. And it's far more vulnerable than the public realizes. The statistics are sobering. Major substations are often protected by little more than chain-link fences. Critical transformers can take 12 to 18 months to replace if damaged. Many key components are no longer manufactured domestically. Cyber defenses are improving, but still inadequate against sophisticated attacks. What makes this particularly concerning is how our dependence on electricity continues to increase. More essential services are becoming digitized and connected. More critical infrastructure relies on constant connectivity. More of our financial system exists purely as digital information, requiring continuous power. A prolonged, widespread power outage would quickly cascade into virtually every aspect of modern life, creating challenges few Americans have prepared for. The speed of modern financial markets has created new forms of systemic risk. Flash crashes that once took days now happen in microseconds. This acceleration means that financial contagion can spread through the system faster than human intervention can possibly respond. Algorithmic trading now dominates market volume, creating situations where automated systems can collectively behave in unexpected and potentially destructive ways. Meanwhile, the fundamental economic indicators show troubling signs beneath the surface. Corporate debt has reached historic highs. Government deficits continue to expand. Unfunded liabilities for pensions and social programs exceed any realistic capacity to fulfill them. Real wages for many Americans have stagnated while essential costs like housing, healthcare, and education have outpaced inflation. These structural imbalances create a financial system increasingly vulnerable to shocks. We've built systems so complex that no single person fully understands them anymore. This complexity itself becomes a risk factor. Think about how many critical systems in modern society are essentially black boxes to most people, including many who operate and maintain them. Financial algorithms execute trades based on strategies that even their creators can't fully explain. Critical infrastructure runs on legacy systems, with decades of patches and modifications, with documentation that's often incomplete or outdated. Supply chains span dozens of countries, with countless dependencies that no single entity fully maps or monitors. This complexity means that when systems fail, diagnosis and repair become increasingly difficult. I've spoken with engineers who describe scenarios where troubleshooting major system failures could take weeks, simply due to the complexity of understanding what went wrong, let alone fixing it. America is not just politically divided, it's increasingly living in different realities. This observation goes beyond normal political disagreement. We're seeing fundamental divergence in how different segments of the population perceive basic facts and information. Media consumption has become so fragmented and algorithmically curated that Americans increasingly occupy separate information ecosystems with little overlap. Trust in shared institutions that once provided common ground has eroded dramatically. This division creates a situation where coordinated national response to major challenges becomes increasingly difficult. During previous national crises, Americans typically came together across political and social divides. The current environment raises serious questions about whether that unifying response would still be possible during a major disruption. Without some degree of shared reality and mutual trust, collective action becomes extremely difficult. The same pattern recognition that helped me identify opportunities has now revealed these converging threats. Looking at my business history, I've consistently identified inflection points before mainstream consensus. I positioned Tesla for the electric vehicle revolution years before major automakers took it seriously. SpaceX pursued reusable rockets when conventional wisdom considered it impossible. Neuralink began working on brain-computer interfaces before most recognized their potential. This same forward-looking perspective is now focused on systemic vulnerabilities. And I hope people will consider these warnings seriously. When multiple smart, successful people start expressing similar concerns independently, it's usually worth paying attention, especially when those concerns run counter to the prevailing narrative. So what should you actually do? Start with the basics. food, water, energy, medical, financial. Build outward from there, based on your specific situation. This practical approach reflects a mature understanding of preparedness. Start with fundamentals that address universal human needs before moving to more specialized preparations. For food security, keep several weeks of shelf-stable supplies and support local agriculture. For water, have both storage and filtration capabilities. For energy, consider backup power options, starting with basics like batteries and working up to more comprehensive solutions where practical. For medical needs, maintain supplies of essential medications and build basic first aid skills. And for financial resilience, maintain emergency funds and consider some portion of assets in inflation-resistant forms. This balanced approach avoids both complacency and extremism. This brings us to the most important question. What should you actually do with this information? First, take my warning seriously, without giving in to fear or panic. History shows that balanced preparation is the rational response to increasing systemic risk. Start by strengthening your personal resilience in practical ways, ensuring you have emergency supplies, developing useful skills, and creating financial buffers where possible. Then look beyond yourself. 2. Community resilience. Connecting with neighbors, supporting local production and food systems, and participating in community organizations. Consider how your skills and resources might contribute to solutions rather than just personal protection. The most resilient societies throughout history have balanced individual preparation with strong community connections. Those who navigate challenging transitions most successfully typically combine practical preparation with maintaining an engaged, positive outlook, focused on adaptation rather than fear. So why isn't this warning receiving more attention? There are powerful incentives to maintain a narrative of normalcy. Markets don't reward bearers of uncomfortable truths. This observation highlights a fundamental challenge in our current information environment. Financial markets react negatively to warnings about systemic risk. Political systems punish messengers who highlight uncomfortable realities. Media outlets face declining audience engagement when presenting complex, nuanced challenges without simple solutions. The result is a situation where discussion of serious vulnerabilities gets pushed to the margins, creating an information environment that favors reassurance over reality. I've noticed this pattern consistently. How legitimate concerns about systemic risks are often minimized or dismissed until crisis actually arrives. By then, the window for proactive preparation has closed. This pattern has repeated throughout history. From financial crashes to societal collapses, warnings precede crises, but rarely receive adequate attention until too late.